been diving into a lot of Florida State game preview stuff. There's just so much out there in terms of podcasts, videos, stories, previews, all that kind of stuff. And I enjoy things from the other perspective, just so you can kind of break out of this bubble from time to time. And so Brendan Sinone's been nice enough to come on the show a couple of times, and we've talked back and forth. And he wrote a story, two of them actually, about matchups that favor LSU or favor Florida State. So the first one that we'll go through here is matchups that he thinks Florida State could take advantage of versus LSU. And the first one he points to is Florida State's running backs against LSU's linebacker. He pulled some film from the Texas Bowl. I know, I'm aware of what happened in the Texas Bowl. But it was above Greg Penn, kind of late to fill a couple of slots, a couple of big Deuce Vaughn runs that he made. And Florida State's running backs obviously had a huge day on Saturday. 3 of them went over 100 yards. These guys are physical. They're big, and they've got some ability. Trayshawn Ward is kind of a balanced back. Lawrence Toafili is really, really shifty and catches the ball well out of the backboard. And then Trey Benson is a hoss. I mean, he is a big, big dude. So it is a good group. Your thoughts on how LSU fares at the linebacker spot? We've talked about the rotation all camp long. We think it's going to be Jones and Penn to start. Baskerville's going to play. I think Wes Weeks may play a little bit. And then where does Harold Perkins factor in? I think probably more so against Southern and New Mexico in the early going. But how do you think they hold up?
Yeah, I think, I'm not as worried as I would be if they didn't have the front that was going to be in front of them. Yeah. I think that front four is going to be so disruptive. You're going to have to put so much focus and attention on making sure those guys aren't living in the backfield. And it's going to create lanes for these backers to run around. And to me, if you want to look at Penn in that Texas Bowl when the defensive line wasn't anywhere remotely to what it is now, and the defensive backfield, the defense just wasn't the same at all. We had Pig Cage out there trying to hold it down. So I think looking at that linebacker room now, if the defensive line can play well, I think it's going to open up for all those guys to play out there. And if Penn's in there, it lets you see, especially with us thinking Baskerville is a pencil-in starter. He must have had an extremely out through camp, and I think if he did that, then he deserves to be out there with Mike Jones.
I don't have a great feel on linebacker. I think I've got a pretty good feel on a lot of positions. That one has eluded me. There's such a heavy rotation. There's so little proven outside of Baskerville. Now, the fact that Baskerville is not running with the ones, to me, feels encouraging because I know he's an SEC quality player. Is he an all SEC player? No, but is he a capable SEC starter for Auburn or LSU or A&M or Florida or Tennessee? Yes, he is. He absolutely is. And so the fact that he has apparently been passed up, I'm going to lean to the side of that's a couple of guys going out there winning jobs.
Yeah.
Now, Mike Jones didn't play great last year, and he's going to be in there. So I could easily argue the other side, but I'm going to choose at this current juncture before we play a game to say, all right, I got a guy that I know can start, and he's not, so those guys must have played well.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of a situation with a guy like Lamine Barrow, like just a good SEC linebacker, probably not going to make the all-SEC team, but you trust him out there to be making plays, and that's exactly kind of the camp that I had Baskerville in. I thought he's a guy that played in a lot of big-time SEC games. Moment's not going to be too big, and he's going to be, be able to be a leader out on that defense, especially with, the lift that I saw from Damone Clark. I thought, Baskerville was a prime candidate to kind of have that leap going into this season, especially being his last year here. But, if the other guys are in there, it lets me see that they've been doing something right. You're not going to take the starting jobs and run out there with the reps if you're just stinking it up and not knowing what you're doing. So we'll see what Penn and Jones can bring because I think they're going to be on a short leash. We're probably going to see a lot more than 2 linebackers playing.
Lamine cashed a few checks in Denver.
Oh, yeah.
Did he play for anybody else?
I'm not sure. I know he went to Denver, though.
He did go for Denver for a brief amount of time. So that's the first matchup that Knowles247 thinks that Florida State can take advantage of, and I don't totally disagree with it, but we shall see. The second one is one that's been beaten into the ground, and we'll continue to talk about it a little bit. Florida State's defensive line against LSU's offensive line. They specifically pointed out a matchup between Derek McClendon or Dennis Briggs, both guys who are older players, against Will Campbell. And I have not seen in my time covering LSU, following LSU football, an offensive lineman have the sudden and, I don't have another adjective for it, but it's sudden rise that he had, where they had 10 practices in the spring, and Brian Kelly came out and said he's the left tackle and has never wavered for it for 1 second from April or whenever that was to now. Like it is, I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
So it lends me to believe that he's done a really good job. He is a true freshman. And I think dealing with 21, 22-year-old men when you're 18, 19 years old is a tall order.
Oh, yeah. No, it's definitely a tall order unless you're a special athlete. And I think that's the camp that Will comes from. You obviously know the attention he got as a high school recruit, and then he took that when he was supposed to be going to prom, and he's taken over the starting left tackle job at LSU, which I think is extremely impressive. And so, as daunting as it may sound and as daunting as it may be and as a big of a red flag as you may think it is, sometimes players are just different, especially at certain points in their careers. And I think, Will is just a lot more far advanced than a lot of left tackles we've ever seen, and that, put him in the running. I think a guy like Cam Wire, who's played a bunch of snaps at that position, I thought he would be a guy that be in the running for that. But, watching Will play and do all the things he's done in the run and the pass game, I think he's done a phenomenal job earning the job. And I think I want to see him go out there and play with success. I think he can do that.
It's not your position, but I'll ask, is it tougher on Will Campbell to block the guy that he's assigned to block, or to know which guy to block? Which of those things is more difficult as a true freshman going to his first game?
No, I think especially at this day and age, I would definitely go with the physical side. They have so many things to their advantage now to help these guys learn the offense so fast. And they're doing it. The coaches have way more times with the players, and what they're doing, I don't think is that far advanced, especially what they're going to be doing in the run game stuff. A lot of read option stuff. You're just blocking inside zone, and the pass protection stuff. If you're a left tackle, you're blocking the end rushing. It's not like it's going to be so daunting where you just can't. It's going to be overwhelmed with all the information, and so they're going to do a good job dumbing it down for them to make sure they know exactly what they're doing and they can play fast. So I think blocking Will Anderson on a Saturday afternoon is probably his toughest task to do, doing that over and over.
So we'll now switch over to the other article, which is the matchups that they think LSU has a very good chance to beat Florida State on. The first one he mentions is LSU's wide receivers versus Florida State's cornerbacks. Now, this is Brendan Sonnone of 247 saying it. I also watched a podcast, the Nolecast that Bud Elliott does. If you're familiar with the internet, Bud Elliott's been a pretty big name in the recruiting circles for 247 for over a decade. He said Florida State's corners looked terrible in the Duquesne game. Now, I'm not watching the All-22 cut, and Duquesne's not exactly, doing much to exploit that. But it was immediately what he brought up, and I said, wait a second. They don't have corners that can cover? Well, then you're going to have to sit back in an 8-man zone. If you can't cover, and if that's a serious weakness, you don't have a chance. Then you're going to only be able to rush 3 or 4 guys, and LSU will probably be able to handle that.
Yeah, no, 100%. It'd be like going against one of those LSU Les Miles teams with no defensive line. You're just going to get ran for 340 yards. And for this team, it's the receivers. If you can't guard these guys and match up with these guys on the outside, they're going to make plays up and down the field. We've seen Kayshawn go for 300 on someone. That's still on the table when some of these guys get going. So I think if that's a matchup that they can't handle and these receivers are making plays and plays again, you're getting the ball out. They're making guys miss. They can't hold up in space. It's going to take so much pressure off of these quarterbacks, and it's going to not end good for the Seminoles.
Amarian Cooper is their number 1 corner. He has been hurt, and Mike Norvell met with the media today. They asked him about Amarian Cooper. He said, yeah, I like what I see. We'll see as it progresses. Mm-hmm. He's probably going to play. But in this 247 story, Brendan Sonnone says that Greedy Vance was fairly meh, is the term he uses. Bud Elliott, on a different podcast, totally separate, said Vance has never proven that he was quote-unquote good. So this is 2 different guys who have Florida State bias that's built in, just like we have it too. I'm not calling anybody out. That's why I enjoy reading these things. They have 2 different guys saying, this secondary does not look good to me. And I had not seen that or read that anywhere until this morning, and it hit me twice when I read this story and listened to that podcast. So this is a significant concern of Florida State's, and that to me is a massive, massive issue for the Noles if that's the case. You got more on that?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say the only thing that I would say, I think I do like Jamie Robinson in the secondary, their safety. To me, he's their biggest playmaker. So if there was a guy that could step up and make some plays, it would be him. But I think the corners on the outside are the biggest cause for concern if you're Florida State. So I think Denbrock's going to try to find ways to take some shots and get these guys the ball.
And then you look at the other matchup, and it's the one that we've talked about a ton. It's Florida State's offensive line against LSU's defensive front. And, again, that they've had a center out. It was out last week. And Mike Norvell was asked about that center again today and said the exact same thing. He literally said, same answer. Like, I like what I see. We'll find out on Sunday. So we don't know what those guys look like. But this is LSU. If this game's going to get lopsided, either way, LSU is going to whitewash this Florida State offensive line. And if that happens, there's just nothing you can do. It's like what was that Super Bowl? Was the Bucks just annihilating
the Chiefs?
The Chiefs. Mahomes just had nowhere to go at any point. That's kind of what it looks like. It's the same thing on almost every snap. And if you're going to try to run a pass play, you've got to max protect, and then you don't have enough guys in the route, and there's nowhere to throw it. And it's just, if you can't win at the line of scrimmage, and that's where every single person who breaks this game down looks at it and goes, LSU's way better there. And it's not like these guys in Baton Rouge have been like all-American players. They've just shown flashes and have some pedigree on the recruiting side of things. If you just put on the tape of Ali Gay in his first game against Mississippi State 2 years ago, you're like, whoa, they can't block that guy. B.J. Ojulari at times has been a terror. Last year against Florida, he was flying off the edge and making plays. Mason Smith is just a 5-star who everybody loves his frame, and he's projectable on draft boards. Jaquelin Roy has had some highlight reel plays, but none of those guys has quite the skin on the wall that some others have. So maybe we're overstating it a little bit, but I do think that those guys are pros, and I think Florida State has some significant issues up front.
Yeah, no, I'm never going to downplay that, because that's what football is. You can't win a game. You can't get anything accomplished without the trench warfare, and you having advantages in that way. And if you have an offensive line that can hold up, you're not going to be able to run the ball. You're not going to be able to convert on third downs. It's just going to be very, very difficult to try to win a football game unless you got the 85 Bears defense out there and they're scoring some touchdowns. It's just going to look ugly for you, especially with this day and age in college football. So I think if you're LSU, you feel really, really great about that. Looking at those guys, you got so many guys getting preseason all SEC honors. You feel like those guys are going to have a phenomenal matchup. And to me, Ojulari getting 54 pressures last year, he's got to get after the quarterback. You got a healthy Ali Gay, and we know what those guys up the middle are going to bring. So I'm going to be looking for that. I think that, to me, would probably be the most disheartening thing if those guys aren't as dominant as we've kind of been, prevailing them to be going into the season. Because if they aren't, I think things could go really, really bad for the Tigers for the whole season.
Yeah, I think we both have post-game obligations this year, or opportunities as they may be, and we'll both be on the air on Sunday night after this game goes final. I think the lead of those two post-game shows is going to be what offensive line gave their guys a chance. I think Jordan Travis is pretty good. I think they've got some wide receivers who got some ability, and clearly they've got some backs who can play. I think LSU's got a ton of playmakers, and they'll have the ability to take advantage of what we now believe to be some significant matchup advantages on the outside if the offensive line holds up. Neither offensive line is great. The defensive fronts are good. Whichever one holds up and lets its guys go to work is going to win the game. I think that's what it's going to sound like in the postgame.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think you could say that about a lot of games. That's just football as a whole. You got to have, good offensive line play, good defensive line play, because if either one goes out the window, things can go left really, really quickly. So I think for LSU, having those huge question marks with their offensive line, they're going to have a lot of questions answered. And I think with the defensive line, it's going to be a lot of pressure on them to play to that level, because, looking at the linebackers, looking at kind of the depth on the outside and the secondary, they're going to have to be the team's strong suit for this team to have success. And so they're going to be on the line to see what they can do this year. Thanks so much for watching Hunt Hill on YouTube.
Now do us a favor. Hit the red subscribe button below and throw us a like. We'll see you next time.